Hi everyone, thanks for being with me. I'm going to talk to you today about an issue which has a great deal of meaning to me, in that for 30 odd years I worked as a social worker, still think as a social worker. Hopefully in most of my interactions with others I act as a social worker. But in that time I've been working with families who've had their children removed. I've come to understand the circumstances which bring families before the child protection system, and I also understand the circumstances in which those people have lived their lives and how that has impacted them. And I'm particularly concerned, though, about the way children have been treated while they're in the child protection system, and the lack of services that are provided to caregivers for those children. As a result of the lack of all of those areas, including the fact that social workers do not listen, they do not understand, they do not comprehend, they do not want to take that extra step to work with families and with children to better those parents' environment, that they fail in probably every area you can imagine to work effectively with parents. And I have worked with hundreds of social workers over the years, and there are a handful who are doing the right thing. So what does that tell me? It tells me that social workers, they do not abide by the basic principles of social work. I don't know where they've learnt their social work principles or values, because they do not fit with mine. I know they do not fit with the Australian Association of Social Workers. So what are they basing their theories and principles on? Normally, it's about the system itself, which governs how one should respond and treat people who come under the child protection system. How we should identify parents as being bad parents, and in some cases, a lot of cases, foster parents as being incapable and not really needing any support whatsoever, because at this point the department has abdicated responsibility around the children. So what are the consequences? Well, the consequences are that children die. And there's an example I want to bring up that came out on the ABC News website today, which I think highlights this very, very important issue. And it's something we all need to be mindful of. For a number of reasons, we've just had a referendum which basically said, bugger you to Indigenous people. We don't give a shit about what it is that you do or how you conduct your lives. We will judge you. We will develop some racist tropes about you. We will discard you. And so what does that mean? Well, this, I think, is an example of what happens, which has been happening for decades now when it comes to approaching child protection system. And in this case, an Aboriginal kid who at the age of 17 chose to take her own life. So I'm going to go through this article because I want you to keep in mind that this actually happens to kids. Aboriginal, non-Indigenous kids, kids from other cultural backgrounds that we fail to understand those cultures as well. It happens right across the board, but in this particular case was an Aboriginal child. And I think there's some examples here of what we overlooked or what the community does not understand in relation to children, and particularly Indigenous children and their caregivers being heard. So as an inquest investigates adequacy of child protection services in wake of an Aboriginal teen suicide. Now, they go on to say, I'm going to read most of this article, it's not very long, but it does tell us a lot more about how kids are treated and how the system will ignore them in reality. A coronial inquest into the death of a 17-year-old Aboriginal girl in central Victoria is investigating the adequacy and responsiveness, and this is important, the adequacy and the responsiveness of the state's child protection services. The girl, who can only be referred to as XY, took her own life on July the 18th, 2021. She was in the care of Anglicare Victoria, living in a residential care facility when she was found dead at a primary school in Bendigo. The Coroner's Court of Victoria, sitting in Bendigo, heard that she had 7 different care arrangements over 5 years. So more than one a year. Number one problem. So in this particular case, this child did not have a continuity of care. What really pisses me off is that you hear people say a forever home. This is the goal. we've got to give this child a forever home. It doesn't matter whether it's foster care or adoption or whatever, they're going to get a forever home. That's bullshit. It rarely happens. It happens in certain circumstances, but not as often as it bloody well should, because the system is incapable of taking the care, of understanding the care needs of a child, and therefore meeting those needs, making that child feel safe and secure in their home. And it goes on to say that many of these were short-term and ultimately inappropriate for her needs. This is what her lawyer had to say. The court heard she was removed from her mother's care in October 2017 when she was 13 years old. Potentially, though, they could have found a way to have worked with the mother and the kinship arrangements around that child in order for her to have stayed in that home. Don't know to what extent they did or did not do that. My guess is they did very little. In conversations, in 2018, told her carer that her stepfather had raped her several times while she was living with her mother. In conversations with counsellors and caseworkers, disclosed allegations of sexual abuse by several males. Okay, understand all of that, get that, but you know, to what extent they still could have worked with the mother and other kinship carers and in order to take care of her. Police, so it was a terrible circumstance. No one's going to deny that. Terrible circumstance for this child, and she needed for some intervention. It doesn't always mean that the child, though, has to be removed. Police repeatedly referred to the Centre Against Sexual Assault, which reported a 3-month, then later a 6-month wait for its counselling service. So the service that was supposed to be providing services for this child, simply were not available. Now, this could be a resourcing issue, and I accept, even though I have an issue, primarily with the fact that you've got to toss money at this problem for some reason, it's all going to go away. I don't believe that for a moment, because it's really about the way people practice, the dedication to their practice, and the dedication particularly to the people they're supposed to be representing, namely the child in this particular case. The court heard she was on medication for borderline personality disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder at the time of her death. Which raises another issue, is that, why are we, for how long had she been on this medication? Why is it that we insist that children are on this medication as opposed to talk therapy, to appropriate therapy and support, which is going to help her through her personal struggles? The first carer, who she lived with for 10 months, complained to Child Protection that they provided her with no support. That is, Child Protection Service provided with no support. This was echoed by the young girl in December 2020 when she wrote a letter to Child Protection, Anglican Victoria and Bendigo District Aboriginal Corporation, claiming the service was not supporting her. So here we have a young person who had the ability, tenacity and the wherewithal to write a letter to those 3 organisations in order to tell them, hold on, I'm struggling, I'm not getting the support that I need. And basically, those organisations, as I understand it, said, fuck you, we don't really care about you. We're probably not going to provide you with the support. Or they didn't listen to her. Back to the referendum. If we listen to people, if we listen to Indigenous people, we can have better outcomes. In this case, if we chose to listen to this young girl, perhaps she'd still be alive today. It goes on to say she had been in contact with BDAC for counselling and cultural engagement for years. She asked for support to connect her with her Aboriginal heritage, family and community. This may have been enough in and of itself to keep her alive. I'd like support in connecting with my elders, heritage, Aboriginal community, she said. The court heard that she was admitted to hospital more than a dozen times between May 2020 and July 2021 after incidents of self-harm and attempts at suicide. The inquest will investigate the adequacy of care and services provided to her by Child Protection and other services. It will also investigate the adequacy of Victoria Police response to her following disclosures of sexual abuse and adequacy of response to her attempted suicides and self-harm. The extent to which her care, treatment and cultural plan was culturally competent and culturally safe will also be examined. So there's a lot that's going to come out of this report. The question we really need to be asking ourselves, I think, is this another wasted life? Is this because a system failed to be able to understand, to listen to a child about the issues that were confronting her? She made the effort. She attempted to get that help that she needed, and the system failed her. And the system fails because those people, not all of them social workers, but the majority of them social workers, do not listen to what people are saying. They're so risk averse that they'd prefer to remove a child and provide them with no services rather than trying to work with the family. Now, in this case, there was some rampant sexual abuse happening within the family. I appreciate that she needed to be removed from that. But without knowing the full story, we don't know who around her was actually prepared to support her, who within her kinship arrangements could have been able to provide her with the heritage, the culture, and those other things that she was screaming out for. As a result of that, she decided that she couldn't bear living in this world any longer, and she chose to take her own life. People need to be held accountable for their behaviour that has resulted in this child's death. And most of them would be social workers who were responsible, who simply do not abide by the principles that govern social work practice. Let me know what you think. Subscribe in the emails. Subscribe, make a comment down below, and let me know what you think about this issue in relation to kids suiciding as a result of the lack of support by the child protection system. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care and look after yourself.